All right, topic number 2. Pandemic has a lot to do with data or lack thereof. You know, um, epidemiologists and government planners didn't have access to the kind of early warning system data that could be used to stop a pandemic in its tracks. And what's the problem here? Well, arguably, our data is locked up into all kinds of various silos. Our healthcare data, a lot of it's manual, but even the digital stuff is buried in pharmaceutical companies and drugstores and pharmacies and clinics and doctors' offices and so on. And this is a subset of a broader problem that we have about data in society, which is that we create all this data. This health data comes from your body. And increasingly, it's going to be real-time data. We're all, wearing these wearables that are tracking our heart rate and steps and so on. It could be tracking our temperature and whether or not we're coughing and all kinds of other things. But that data is captured by these large institutions. And overall, our data is created by us and it's captured by others. And the virtual Emily, this mirror image of her, may know more about her than she does because she can't remember what she bought a year ago or said a year ago or where exactly she was a year ago, what medication she had or what diagnosis she had and so on. But that data is captured by a series of what we could call digital conglomerates. And it's kind of like feudalism, you created some produce and then the landlord took it all away and you were left with a little bit. Well, Emily's left with a few digital cabbages. And that means she can't use the data to plan her life. She can't monetize the data. It means that the data is insecure and she's going to be left picking up the pieces when it gets hacked. It means that her privacy is being undermined. And that's a real thing. People say to me, well, Don, privacy's dead. Get over it. If you got nothing to hide, what's your problem? This is foolishness. Privacy is the foundation of freedom. And this data represents our identities and we need to get it back so that we can manage it responsibly. Now, to the point here, it also means that these data are all locked up in silos. So a pandemic comes along, we can't aggregate this data together. So what if we had a self-sovereign digital healthcare record on a blockchain? It'd be in a black box. And this is not a big step. UHN, University Health Network, number 4 health system, or is it number 2 now in the world, according to the recent studies? My UHN, before you leave the hospital after your x-ray, your radiology report is in your identity. Well, the next step is to move that to a blockchain where you own it. And then you can get a second opinion. You can anonymize it and give it to science. But we could have state mandated availability of civilian data and critical health information. And it could be anonymized in the case of a pandemic. So we could instantly have real-time data to track what's going on. We could have civilian-controlled digital identities to provide pertinent health information that could help with treatment. And so, you're going to check off a form and it will constantly be asking you stuff. But if I'm found unconscious somewhere, I will give my health record or these parts of my health record, maybe not my psychiatric record, I don't know. But anyway, that will be available to any certified clinician or healthcare practitioner. So we can make choices like that, even though we control the data. And then we can have incentive systems to make private data available and to appropriate clinicians and government planners. And this would be an extraordinary thing because you'd have real-time data of an entire population. And of course, once you're immunized, a healthcare certificate could be attached to that identity where you can have authorization without identification. If you go somewhere where you must be immune, a record like this could say, this person is immune. It's not going to say this person is Don Tapscott. It's going to say the person with this identity attached to this human being is authorized to enter this building or to do something else. So what a huge opportunity that is. And of course, ultimately, all of our data can be in this self-sovereign digital identity. Now, how do you get people to do the right thing in this pandemic? How do you get people to wear masks? Well, it'd be helpful in the United States if the commander in chief would wear a mask and not say that they're silly. And of course, the head of state sets the corporate culture by their own behavior, whether they intend to or not. But there are all kinds of other things that we can do to get people to do the right thing. Now, one, of course, is the state forces it. That's one thing we could do. But a second is we could get people to act with integrity. And in our research, we found that there are all kinds of ways with blockchain to build incentive systems to where you create benefits for somebody through a token. And there are all kinds of benefits, informational benefits, even financial benefits, and so on, where they get digitized assets or tokens based on doing the right thing and protecting themselves and others. How do you get the right skills and talent to a situation? Well, this is another one that we spent a lot of time thinking about. So something like licensing and staffing, we can have issuing of medical certifications on a blockchain, and we can also, through staffing, deploy the global, create a global medical talent marketplace. And that's one of these things that this technology does very well. And I'm racing through here because I don't want to run out of time and have our conversation at the end. But the other thing is that there are all kinds of steps that we can take, the final one, to sustain our economy. And because we need to get economic activity, and that's tied in with health outcomes and success. You know, isolation is one of the major risk factors in health. And we need to get people moving again and get them doing stuff again. Now, there are many topics here, but one of them has to do with money itself. So if, if supply chains are the foundation of commerce, money is its lubricant. I don't know if that analogy works, but we need to change money because money, let's take cash as an example. Cash, it turns out, has a bunch of new problems, not just that it's a foundation of organized crime and the global drug industry and tax evasion, and it tends to have evaporation and spillage and so on. Cash, turns out, is dirty and it carries viruses. So there are new kinds of digital cash. I'm not talking about a credit card or, a debit card or something like this. That's not digital money. That's traditional money that information about it is being stored in a computer system, and messages go around and point to who is the owner of who. I'm talking about money as a bearer instrument. If I have a $20 bill in my pocket, I'm the bearer of that cash. And that's what money is. We're going to make actual money digital, moving around on the distributed ledger. Now, most people think, well, that's Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Well, these community-based currencies are just the beginning. Now we have corporate initiatives like Libra from Facebook. And if Libra can pull this off, and that's a big if, they'll become the largest retail bank in the world by an order of magnitude. They could solve some really big problems, the remittances problem that I outlined. But lots of concerns about that as well. And you can bet that Jeff Bezos is not going to want people on Amazon paying for books using Libra. So Amazon, of course, has its own currency initiative underway. But the really big one is what I would call state-based or central bank digital currencies. And these are, what we're talking about here is the digital dollar. Basically, money becoming digital. So as part of our events that are happening at the end of October, globalblockchainweek.org, There's an amazing conversation that will occur between Alex Tapscott and Chris Giancarlo, the former head of the CFTC, the big commodities regulator in the U.S., is now part of the Digital Dollar Project. And he's working away quickly to try and solve this problem because China is coming out with a digital currency first, and they're going to roll that across Southeast Asia and into Africa, and they hold the potential to replace the U.S. dollar as the currency of record. So the Fed in the United States is squirreled away in trying to solve that problem. We should do it here in Canada. We've got some great leaders in this country. Supply chain finance, another big opportunity, insurance and risk management. And we can also have decentralized models of governance. So I'll just point you, before I close here, to a couple of other reading materials. This is a new book by Alex Tapscott, my co-author, and he's actually my son. Extraordinary, mind-boggling book about the future of all of this. So those are just 5 ideas. Building just-in-time supply chains, solving the problem of our health data, building new incentives for people to do the right thing, making sure that we have the right skills and talent to address our medical needs, and taking steps to sustain the economy. These are all available for you now for free in a report, and you just go to blockchainresearchinstitute.org, and through a collaboration with Northern Micro, this is now available to everybody. blockchainresearchinstitute.org. Okay, so let me roar ahead here and try and talk about what all of this means. So I think this is going to lead to some big changes in the nature of companies and governments. And 80 years ago, a Nobel Prize-winning economist named Ronald Coase asked a deceptively simple question. He said, "Why does the firm exist?" Adam Smith is right. And the open market's the best mechanism for allocating goods, resources, money, people. Why isn't everybody an independent contractor at every step along the way in production? Why do we have firms? And he said the answer is, and he won a Nobel Prize for saying this, transaction costs. The cost of search, trying to find all the right people and information, an open market, that'd be prohibitive. So you bring it inside the boundaries of a firm where you have filing cabinets and org charts to find people and so on. The cost of coordination, getting all these people to work together, the cost of contracting. Imagine someone coming into intensive care and every little activity was a contract. You know, the physician would have to do a contract with the ventilator company and all the different pharmaceuticals and the suppliers of beds and on and on. Well, this would be prohibitive. So the industrial age corporation was vertically integrated, and it did everything from soup to nuts. That was also the architecture of the industrial age government. We call them government bureaucracies, right? And in the early days of IT and paradigm shift in 93, I said the boundaries of the firm and governments are becoming more porous because of IT. Then we saw the internet, and companies began to unbundle even further, as did governments. This is a 25-year-old diagram of the Cisco business ecosystem. They focused on what they did best and partnered to do the rest. What will happen now with blockchain? Well, I think that blockchain is demolishing these transaction costs and the costs of establishing trust. And this is going to lead to some big changes in the deep architecture and structure of the firm, but also of governments. You see, because we think that talent is inside. You know that expression, your most important asset goes out the elevator every night. Well, that asset may never go out the elevator at all. So let me just flip ahead here because I want to get to the conversation. Blockchain is changing every one of these industries in the private sector, but it's also changing many things about government. The nature and operations of government, it's changing money and money itself, but it can also help us solve the problem of the crisis of legitimacy of democracy. And right now, there probably isn't a person listening to this who would not agree with me that democracy is in deep crisis. Legitimacy is the idea that you may disagree with who's in power, but at least you think the system is the best system. Well, now we have, young people in many countries aren't voting. Politicians seem beholden to big interests. We have the president of the United States saying democracy doesn't work. It's full of fraud. The center of American democracy, Washington, is a swamp, and so on. How can we move forward? Well, what I've been writing and arguing is that we've had a first era of democracy. We established these elected institutions of governance, but there was opacity, a weak public mandate. Citizens were inert, and representatives were beholden to powerful interests. Let's move to a second wave, characterized by a culture of public deliberation, active citizenship. We could actually have representatives that are accountable to citizens. And imagine, you can have smart money now. You send your kid off to university and you give him money and you hope he uses it on books and tuition and not in the bar. Well, with smart money, he goes into the bar, orders a mojito, and the money says, "I'm sorry, Bobby, I don't do mojitos. I only do books and tuition." Well, why can't you have a vote inside a smart contract that specifies the program of the representative? So that's one of many, many things that we can be doing to rebuild our democratic institutions. So I'd like to end here with this following thought. We're moving to a more decentralized world, and the way that we create trust, which is the sine qua non in business, but also of our governments today, is changing. And trust is so critical because it's never been lower in most institutions in society, not since they've been measuring it in many decades. And recently at the BRI, we've been studying nature. Birds or fish come in schools, bees come in swarms, starlings over the moors of England come in something called a murmuration. And the murmuration refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And it has a number of functions. You can see on the right of the screen here, there's a hawk, a fierce predator of starlings, 25 times the size of a little bird, being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. And scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. And there's leadership, but there's no one leader. And when the moment is right, this magic happens. So is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or might we actually learn something from this? Well, the murmuration functions according to the principles of this trust protocol, which I've just outlined to you today. It's a vast collaboration. Remember, I said trust is not achieved by a middleman, but by cryptography, collaboration, and clever code. There is code in the DNA of the birds that gives it rules. Big rule is don't bump into anybody else. But another rule is, don't get too far away. The murmuration has a great interdependence. When I'm speaking to a group of CEOs or business leaders, I'll say that I don't think business can succeed in a world that's failing. And exhibit A for that is this pandemic. Exhibit B, hopefully soon, will be climate change, that we need to take action on these big problems. And the murmuration functions as if the interest of a little bird is connected to the interests of the murmuration as a whole. And it has a great interdependence. And it also has a great integrity. And integrity is really the foundation of trust. Ask yourself, what is trust? It took me a month to write this sentence on a book I wrote on this topic. I think that trust for business and for government is the expectation that the other party will act with integrity. You trust a government if you think that it will act with integrity, if it will do the right thing, if it's honest, if it's considerate of your interests, they really care about themselves and not just about their own power, that they're accountable, that they'll abide by their commitments, and that they have transparency. The expression, "what are they hiding?" shows a relationship between transparency and trust. Well, this thing acts with integrity such that a little bird will chase after a predator 25 times its size because it knows that the other birds will do the right thing, that they will have its back. So imagine if we connect ourselves on this planet with some kind of vast network of glass and air and cryptography and software. What intractable problems could we solve? We could fight pandemics a lot better, but we could also address many of the big challenges facing us as a civilization today. And it's my hope. I look at this thing and I get a lot of optimism that maybe this smaller world that my grandchildren inherit might actually be a better one. Thank you very much.